Welcome to everything you need to know for today. And today we are talking melons. Well, it might not be everything there is to know, it is everything you need to know for today. So cantaloupe and honeydew melons belong to the bigger family of what they call musk melons. These first started in the Middle East, and there's many different varieties, and I think the biggest reason for the varieties is because when you plant two melons in the same garden or within 500 feet, they cross-pollinate and then you get multiple different kinds of melons. So I think that is the reason why there is over 1,200 varieties of melon. So how do you select a melon? And there's a few very important things that you should know. First, you want to choose a melon. I'll hold this one up. You want to choose a melon with no bruising. So this one looks pretty good all over. That almost looks like a bruise, but when you feel it, it's rough. And that's one of the second parts about choosing it. There should be, and I think there's one on this one here, there should be a yellow side to the melon. That means that it ripened while on the ground, which means that there was more vitamins and minerals going into that melon instead of being picked and then ripening on that drive over. So that is the second thing that you are looking for. The other thing is melons should all be heavy for their size. So if you pick this up and you can toss this around and it is not heavy, that means that there's not a whole lot of water to it. It might be dried out, might be past its best date, but you should put that back. So they should be heavy for their size. They should also have nice coloring. Now, typically the coloring comes more versus just a green as they ripen. So this one here, you can tell that there is some green to it, but it will continue to ripen as it sits on your counter. But as you will find, there is so many different colors in the melon family. So you can also get a big variety when you are shopping. When you get these at the grocery store, the watermelons don't ripen anymore. Once they are picked, that is what they're going to be, which is why it's really important to have that yellow spot on your watermelon. This one has two. That one maybe is just where it rubbed on another one. So that looks like it was sitting on the ground right there. So then the sun was able to ripen it. So watermelons are hard to choose. I find some people knock on it. If it's really echoey in there, then it's hollow, which means maybe the inside, that middle where the seeds are, have dried out. So they knock on it. You can't, I find with watermelons, there's nothing really to smell. So usually you just go by weight and that knocking. But all of the rest of the melons are going to continue to ripen as you have them on your counter at home for just a couple of days. So when we talk nutrition, 1 cup of cantaloupe has about 50 calories, which is nothing at all, but it contains 106% of the vitamin A that we need every day and 95% of the vitamin C. So that's 1 cup, which is 2 servings of fruit. So this cantaloupe, as well as most of them, are also a source of potassium, which is really good for the heart. And then the cantaloupe has folate as well, which is really wonderful for women in the childbearing age. We all need a whole lot of folate. So a cup of that honeydew has 60 calories, so about the same, 50% of the vitamin C, and 11% of potassium, so more potassium in these, so that's great. It also has some fiber, folate, and vitamin B6, so a good mix. So the watermelon has the least amount of calories from all of them, probably because it has the most amount of water. And it is loaded with a vitamin or an antioxidant that reflects the color. It's a lycopene, the same antioxidant that's in tomatoes. There is a whole lot of that in watermelon, and that's linked to a decrease in the risk of cancer, heart disease, and eye-related conditions as well. So the watermelon also has a good amount of vitamin A, vitamin C, and potassium. So since we've kind of talked potassium in all of these melons, they're fantastic choices for people that have blood pressure issues, because potassium is that vitamin that supports the health of the heart. So how do we prepare these melons, right? That's what we all think about. So you can store any uncut melons whole on your countertop for a few days, but as soon as you cut them, they should go in the fridge for a max of 5 days. After 5 days, typically they've ripened enough that they have started to go bad or slimy. So 5 days max in the fridge after you cut them. So what you do want to do, and we talk about this a lot in our cooking, is that you want to wash the outside of your melons before you cut them. And the reason for that is because when we're looking at the farm to table situation, there's a lot of hands involved. So we just want to make sure that there's no dirt getting on our cutting boards as we're cutting them. So we, especially in the middle of the summer, we buy a watermelon and then we get tired of it before it's all gone, right? So what can we do with melons besides just eating them raw? So one really fun way is to blend them up, put some other maybe yogurt with it, maybe a little bit of other mango juice, or just kind of mix a couple melons or other fruit, make them into freezer pops. You can put them in glasses, put a spoon in them, and then just throw them in the freezer. You can use melon slices to enhance your water flavor. So for all those people that are trying to drink more water, that would be a really great mix on how to change that flavor a little bit. You can make a snack of fruit by putting it on like a wooden toothpick or a skewer and put like grapes and strawberries and melon if you want to get really fancy as well. You can even grill these. So when you have a firmer melon like the cantaloupe and then the honeydew, you can cut them into chunks and then put them on the barbecue for a few minutes aside, and it grabs a bit of a smoky flavor to it, and it's really, really tasty. And then of course melons go great in smoothies. So those are a few things that you can do. So I challenge you this summer to go out and buy a melon that is new. One that you've never heard of, one that you've never seen or tasted before, and then invite a friend, figure out if you like it. So what do we have here? What has Marianne created for us? This is beautiful. So if I don't know if you can see all of those, they're big watermelon in the front. So if we start in the middle, this one's a different one. This is called a hammy. And it seems, as you can tell, it's kind of similar to that cantaloupe, but of course it's a different flesh color. And it is going to be kind of pinky inside. It's hard to know when they're done, but the best thing to do, we have two ends. This is where it attached to the vine, and then the other end is where the blossom was that turned into this fruit. So if you can push on this end, you can see that indent a tiny little bit. That means that it should be ripe. When we push on other ones and they don't indent, that means it needs a couple of days on the counter. So we're going to cut into that hammy in a minute. But these two here are the honeydews. So this is your typical green fleshed honeydew, green on the inside. And this one is an orange flesh. The great thing is they've labeled that for us, so that's wonderful. But if you can tell, they're slightly different on the outside. This one's going to be orange in the middle. This is our typical green in the middle. But at a quick glance, it's hard to tell. So make sure that they've labeled them correctly by reading that sticker on them in the store. And then this last one back here, I think we've talked about this one before. This is a Santa Claus watermelon, and it has that lovely spot where it was on the ground. And this would be the blossom end, probably right there. No, right there, because that pushes a bit better. So the Santa Claus is typically quite sweet, quite tasty. This is your canary melon, so this one's going to be quite yellow on the inside. And Marianne said with this one too, scrape as little of the flesh off as you can, because it's the sweetest on the inside and then gets less sweet as you get towards the rind. So just scrape off those seeds and then eat all of that. This, of course, that's our cantaloupe. Now you can tell in this one here, our cantaloupe doesn't have any of those lines on them that we see on some of them. This is an example of a very similar melon. That one is called a musk melon that has those lines that are really green when they're not quite ripe and then they turn yellow. But this one is specifically the cantaloupe. The other one is that musk melon. So they are similar, and probably they just cross-pollinated in the garden, but they are two different ones, and then the middle is bright orange. So again, we can tell how ripe they are by pushing on that blossom end. So right here, that has a little push to it too. So that's probably nice. And I do find with these cantaloupes, you can, I smell more here. Yeah, so I find in the grocery stores, there's a lot of smells and you can't really smell, but once you get it home, I can smell that cantaloupe smell in there. So that's typically how you know. But I tend to buy my cantaloupes and then leave them on the counter for 1 or 2 days, just because as soon as you cut into them, they won't continue to ripen really quickly at all. So you want them as ripe as possible. So Marianne says that they have more smell to them and more flavor when they're room temperature versus being cold, because of our taste buds and how they interact with that. So that's pretty great. So just to note too, the most common melons, the watermelon, the cantaloupe, the honeydew, those are the sweetest ones, I think, because they know what sells well. So those are the ones they always bring in. So those are the sweetest ones. And if you like the sweetness, you can enjoy those ones. So this one here, this is called a golden sweet watermelon. Sarnia Produce, because that's a new kind of melon, and they wanted to show us what it looked like. So we're more apt to buy something that's not a full-size melon, that's new, so that we can see what it looks like. So this was $6, so definitely not cheap. But if we want a little flavor and we want to maybe surprise some guests or visitors, then we can definitely buy something like that when they cut it open. So let's cut into this hammy and let's be surprised. So we're going to cut all the way through, putting our hand on the top. What color do you think it's going to be? Oh, there we go, and look at that. You can see the effects. There was a bit of a crack in there, and you can see what happened. So you'd probably want to cut off a good inch around it, or else that flavor is going to get into the rest of it. But very similar to the cantaloupe. It looked the same on the outside, or very similar, and the inside was the same as well. So I challenge you, get a new melon and try it for the summer and see what it tastes like. Some people say that it tastes like a cucumber, some of these not so sweet ones as well. So there you go, everything you need to know about melons.